On behalf of the Florida Center for Students with Unique Abilities, welcome to this session entitled Family-to-Family Toolkit, a springboard for students and families to explore post-secondary education options. My name is Janice Seabrooks Blackmore, and I am the Executive Director of the Florida Center for Students with Unique Abilities, FCSUA. My co-presenters are Joey Garrett, a doctoral student from the University of Florida, Chris Webb, a retired professor from the University of North Florida, and Iris Neal, Program Manager, Outreach Coordinator with me at FCSUA.
We are pleased and honored to introduce you to the Gardners. Camille and Andy Gardner were tireless advocates to ensuring the 2016 passage of the Florida Postsecondary Comprehensive Transition Program Act, also known as FPCTP. Andy served from 2008 to 2016 as a member of the Florida Senate and was the president of the Senate from 2014 to 2016. Camille is on the board of directors for the Down Syndrome Foundation of Florida and is an agent for change in inclusion, access, and educational practices in Florida. Listen to some excerpts from their introductory message.
When any of your kids are looking for college, you want something that they feel excited about. I think, our goals would be, my goal for him would be when he finishes wherever he goes is to be able to get a job that he could hopefully support himself. And so something that will help him be on a path for that, something that gives him, the opportunity to be independent. We'd love to have, I think, an on-campus option. And at the same time, something that will challenge him academically and where the students that are participating in the post-secondary program are valued on campus. I know 100% I don't want something that he's just physically there. I want him to be an active, contributing, respected member of that school's community.
You have just listened to the opening Family2Family film featuring the Gardners. The Family2Family Toolkit will highlight other families throughout the product. Look for the Family2Family icon and click on their stories. These family members were recruited from programs across Florida and through the Florida Down Syndrome Foundation. They generously shared their insights, perceptions, guidance, and advice through their real-life experiences with post-secondary education.
So this is our agenda for the day. We are going to go through the different sections of the toolkit. There are 5, and then we're going to end with questions and comments. So the first section is discovering. The second section is learning. The third is understanding. The fourth is considering and identifying choices. And the fifth is defining roles. Within each section, we have different toolkits, checklists, and different information such as history and communication across campus. And throughout these 5 sections, we presented a way in which families can learn more about post-secondary education. So the first question is why? Why did we do this toolkit? Well, the important part is that it's serving as a springboard. It's not supposed to answer all questions for families, but it is supposed to offer a great jumping off point for them to gain more drive, motivation, and energy as they begin their investigation into post-secondary options for students. So it provides a lot of resources, it answers a lot of common questions, and it's really just a springboard into the post-secondary education for their students. So 2 fun things that we have throughout the toolkit are Family2Family Films, which Iris touched on, and Fizzes. So the Family2Family Films are films of other parents who have had the experience of sending their child through post-secondary education programs and their viewpoints. We have various questions scattered throughout the toolkit, and those questions have to go with the different sections of the toolkit. And then they just kind of answer honestly, what was their experience? And it's supposed to provide guidance, and it's supposed to, kind of help families coming into this type of post-secondary education programs just answer some of their questions. And then there's fizzes, and these are the two logos as well. And these fizzes are just extra resources. So say a parent is reading or a family member is reading and they want more information on post-secondary programs in Florida, there'll be a fizz for that they can click. And that will take them to an external link to provide extra resources. So this is an example of one of the Family2Family films. So this question that we asked them is, what would you recommend to post-secondary education programs to make families more aware of these opportunities? So let's listen to their perspective about their awareness of post-secondary programs.
So what would you recommend to post-secondary education programs to make families more aware of these opportunities? What would you recommend the programs do?
I guess this outreach, if we're not going to have that one-on-one because of our social restrictions at the moment, but even before that, that program hasn't been carried out for maybe 4 years, 3 years maybe. So to have something like this to go out into the directly to parents of ESE children, I think it's fantastic, which is why I signed us all up for it. I'm like,
that's just an example of one family answering one of our questions.
So when we look at all of these different abbreviations and acronyms, it becomes alphabet soup. So this is one of the main purposes of our family toolkit, is to help families learn these terms, become familiar with them, and use them. For instance, in Florida, an FPCTP is a Florida Post-Secondary Comprehensive Transition Program. And sometimes we just refer to post-secondary education programs as PSEs. So familiarizing our families with these acronyms is very helpful to them. For instance, did you know that Florida is second in the nation? We have, as of October 2020, we have 22 PSEs or programs in the state. And look around the states surrounding Florida too. We certainly have, can be proud of the number of programs that we have done in the country in comparison to the other states in the country. So that's exciting news. So one of the things, this is one of the fizzes that we have. You'll see these throughout our presentation, and you can see the little fizz icon down there. We talk a lot about CTPs. So when we talk about those, we have referred our families to Think College. And if they click on the Think College fizz, they will be taken to an outside website that they can do some additional discovery about family information for Think College and their perspective on it too. So that's just an example of CTP resources that can be found on this particular fizz. Another thing we do is talk about what does it mean in Florida? And these are the requirements that families need to know about that Florida Post-Secondary Comprehensive Transition Program Act. And just a few of the bullets that we know that to verify students' eligibility or to prove that the institution is a federally approved, or documentation of a submission, or in the process of. So those are some important things for families to consider. One of our families was, we were fortunate to have a mother who wanted to do her information session for families in Spanish. So let's listen to what this family member has to say. The question is, how did you and your student learn about post-secondary programs?
Bueno, la forma en que, digamos que me enteré, desde pequeño, mi niño fue diagnosticado a los 2 años y medio con autismo y desde entonces he participado en grupos y a través de estos grupos he hecho amigas de niños que tienen autismo o que tienen otras disabilidades. Y con ellas hablando sobre qué va a pasar con nuestros hijos más adelante. Buscamos información y una de ellas colocó en Facebook que FU había o iba a abrir un proyecto para niños con discapacidades.
Powerful, isn't it? We're going to continue on to section 3, which is we call understanding. And the first slide we're going to talk about, and this is an area that families really told us they need to understand when we talk to them, is the whole notion of credentials. We talk about credentials in 2 ways. Credentials can be kind of an umbrella term that includes all of the exit kinds of papers, or they can be specific to a credential you earn in a post-secondary education program. So we want to explain that, and we take a lot of time to explain those terms to family members because it's important that they understand that some programs, there are opportunities to earn degrees, whether those are bachelor degrees or associate's degrees, and to have an actual major. Whereas other programs offer such things as a credential. A student would graduate with a credential from a post-secondary education program. These might include micro credentials and badges, and that the badge is a way of recording a credential online. It may include certificates, it may include certifications, or it may include an exit paper from a college experience program. And these terms are just among the many that families told us they needed more understanding of. So we've really tried to do a lot of talking to families about those notions. And the next slide, we will talk about how we get to some of this. And in section 3, we have the families go through tables of questions. This one happens to be on support structures. In other words, support structures are what things are in place in post-secondary programs that will support students' growth through the programs. This one happens to be in career development. How do the students enrolled in the post-secondary education program progress through career development? So these are some questions that family members and their students can ask post-secondary programs and or universities and take notes on those. The next slide is also an example of understanding too. And I'll let Joey talk about the implications of understanding inclusion.
Yeah, so another section of under section 3 and understanding is inclusion. And there's also checklists for this as well that are in the toolkit. And some sample questions that are in the toolkit that students and families could use are whether or not they're enrolling or auditing classes with their peers without disabilities on campus, if they're able to facilitate or use some facilities such as the library, the gym, or the cafeteria, and whether or not they can live in residence halls with their peers on campus. And all of these are really interesting and important ways in which inclusion can be a part of the college campus experience. And it's so crucial to ensure that the student gets the optimal experience of being in the post-secondary program. And one of the ways that we are trying to show that you can do this is through inclusion. So you can see that there's some sample questions listed here that you might also think about K through 12, but they're also relevant for post-secondary education. And then also on this slide, you see some different levels of inclusion. It's important to understand with your program that your student's going to go to, whether or not they have inclusion and what type of inclusion they do have, what the level of inclusion looks like. And it's just so important as a part of the post-secondary education experience to consider as a student and as a family member.
And next, we're going to listen to another Family to Family, we asked them, what do you believe are the biggest challenges? So let's listen to what the Gallardo and Cooper family had to say about this.
That in our experience, our concern was Lisa's reluctance, because and trying something new it was very trying for us. I think it was also a reflection of how she felt about herself, and something that was new was extremely challenging. Mm-hmm. So that was our big challenge, how to convince her, because she's an adult. I cannot pick her up and take her to the preschool anymore. I cannot do those kinds of things. Was for her to understand that this was going to be good for her. We were
And on the next slide, you'll see yet another table that we use to have families talk about program characteristics, and was finding out some things about inclusion. Like Joey mentioned to you too, are they housed on the main campus? Do they attend campus with their peers? So these are important, critical pieces of information for families to know the right questions to ask, and then what to do with that when they do get these pieces of information too. So we have lots of these sprinkled all the way through the toolkit too. The next slide is another one, talking about accommodations and services. When they talk with folks from the Disability Service Support or the Disability Resource Center, whatever it's particularly called on that campus too. This is a huge area that we need to talk about, because does the post-secondary program do the accommodations, or does the Disability Resource Center do the accommodations on campus? There's a lot of different ways that programs do this. So this is a good way to ask programs important information, and then decide with your family whether this is appropriate for your student. And this is a segue into section 4, a big section on considering and identifying family to choices. And so listen to what Denise Peaks has to say about choices, the choices she had for her student, and the choice her student actually had.
And so from the age of about 5, when I thought that she could kind of begin to understand, she had gone through early childhood and she was now in kindergarten, we started talking about college very early on. I took her down to visit the campus where I had gone to school. I incorporated her into Girl Scouts when she was a daisy. She was a daisy, then she was a junior. No, she was a daisy, she was a brownie, she was a junior, and then she was a cadet. So she went through Girl Scouts up until age 13. So it was just my plan to always just to introduce her to those opportunities that will allow her to be able to interact with other people, to be sensitive to other people's needs, to be able to help her develop decision-making skills.
So off of that video of dreams and goals, one of the largest sections in our Family to Family Toolkit are checklists. On the next slide, you'll see all the different types of checklists that we have, and they cover a variety of different topics that you would experience while at a post-secondary education program. But what's really neat about these is that they're going to be able to complete them online, so they can fill them out online and then print out a report, which is going to be incredibly beneficial for them to see their results. And also if they want to take these to IEP meetings as they're beginning to plan what their next stage is going to look like. And then there's also a section for families to fill out the same checklists. So then at the end of it, you can go ahead and look at the checklists from the student's perspective and the family's perspective and see where they vary. Where are they the same? Where do they have the same ideas, same goals? Do they, see themselves in the same place? It's a really great opportunity for families and students to work together, but to have their separate responses as well. And like I said, the ability to be able to print these out and have these reports is, we think, just so crucial. And, you know, if they don't want to complete it online, they can just go ahead and print it and hand complete it. But you'll see some examples a little later on. But we're really excited about this part of our toolkit because we really feel like it's going to really help students and their families. So this next slide, like I said, showcases the different sections that we have. So there are quite a few, you know, from location, transportation, and housing, social life. We really tried to take all of the major areas and put these into checklists. And the checklists are questions where they are able to rate 1 through 6 of how important it is to them. And then the same thing for the family. So I'm going to go ahead to the next slide so you can see an example. So this is an example of a checklist that has to do with degrees, majors, credentials, and programs, which is one of the major section. And you can see it gives you the student responses. So the campus characteristic, for example, the campus offers the major course of study, credential, or a career program that I want. So the student can go ahead and say, this isn't very important to me, and circle a 1. And then say the family is separately completing it and they have the same question and they think this is very important and they put a 6. Well, this is a great opportunity for them to come together and discuss why they put different things, where they see each other or where they see the student in the future. And then the idea is to discuss, it's just an area for students or families to put down maybe things that they think of as they're completing the checklists, or maybe they don't understand the question, so they don't know how to answer. So a great spot would be for the student to put, you know, and the idea is to discuss, so they just didn't understand that question, so that when they go ahead and go over it, whether it's be with their family or their IEP team, they're able to know how they were feeling, what they were thinking when they chose that selection to that question. So we're really, really excited about these checklists because they offer great opportunities for students to express their opinions. Where do they see themselves? You know, how important is it to them? So the next family-to-family film that we have here is on considering identifying choices, so the same section that the checklists are found in. And this question is, explain why you think it is important for the post-secondary education program your student attends to match or align with your students' goals and dreams. So this directly correlates back to these checklists and why we felt they were so important. So let's hear from the Isaac family.
That they can pursue things that are of interest to them and what they think they're, you know, where they want to go with their life. But also, you know, one of the aspects of going to the post-secondary ed is that you also get to expand your horizons. And I think Justin was always interested in hospitality. And so it worked out great for UCF because they had hospitality, but also there's so much more about the post-secondary ed in terms of expanding your horizon and becoming more independent. And, you know, I mean, in the end, the goal is employability. And so, you know, has the program moved him towards his goal in the future?
Mm-hmm. It's a really great response.
And that will lead us into our next section, which is defining roles as family members. We found this to be such an interesting section to work on. And the Smiloff family will talk about how their roles have changed. They will answer, how has your student grown in advocating for herself?
Well, Sienna was very shy when we first joined Project Saint at the Santa Fe Community College. And when we first took her first day, and you have to keep in mind, Marin actually teaches at Santa Fe, so he has an office there. Mm-hmm. The first thing she said is, "You're not leaving me here, are you?" And she was very nervous, very scared, because she wasn't used to, you know, new situations and us not being there. And we said, you know, Dad's right here on campus. If you need anything, we're here. By the end of the first semester, she was like, "Why are you guys waiting for me? I know where I'm going and I can find my way."
And that's a wonderful, wonderful thing to think about, in that transition from being dependent to being an independent student on campus. And that will lead us to our next slide, which is defining some questions. And one of the really fundamental kinds of things to think about is differences between high school and college and technical school, where post-secondary education programs are found. So we're going to think about ways in which those differences can impact families. And the next slide will give us an example of that too. So what we want you to do now is, we said teachers are certified in high school, or they're usually in progress to be certified educators. Whereas in college or technical school, they are experts in their content area, like chemistry or science or Spanish, that they teach, but they may not have had prior teaching experience. In high school, teachers notify students who need assistance. If they see a student struggling, they will notify the students and oftentimes families that that student may need assistance. However, in college or technical school and post-secondary programs, the student has to begin communication with that professor if they require help. So we'd like you to just take a second here and name another difference under the heading of family interactions. What are some other family or faculty interactions that might be different in high school when you compare them to college or technical school? That will lead us into the next slide, where one of our family members talks about how the relationship has changed with her student.
This program has boosted his confidence, which gives him the ability to push, to try new things. He's in the kitchen more, eager to try new recipes, and his ability to focus has increased for a longer period of time, ultimately helping him with his ADHD. He also now demonstrates a higher level of maturity, setting his own alarm, waking himself up on time, completing his household chores, classwork assignments without any assistance. I believe my relationship with my son has changed because he believes in himself as well as his future.
And isn't that what we want ultimately too? The next slide is another topic that we spend a lot of time talking about, FERPA and HIPAA, and how those are involved with post-secondary education program. Of course, FERPA being the law that helps us, helps students keep their educational information to themselves and won't allow faculty to disclose information to families. HIPAA has more to do with health. And so there are some real implications for both of those laws in post-secondary education. And in section 5 with defining, we do talk about that in great detail and how families can think through that, along with forms they can sign or their student can sign. So we do go into that in quite a bit of depth. So families told us that's what they needed and wanted. So that's what we have addressed in the toolkit. And we have a family member who talks about the idea of guardianship and how that impacted her family.
Well, I think this is a very complex issue. I think that for us, Elise had the benefit of being fully included in all of her education, preschool, elementary school, middle, high, and we really thought that she was extremely prepared for the next chapter of her life because her dream was always to go to college. And so, like every parent, when you drop any of your children off at college, you know there's going to be some success, lots of successes, and some hiccups along the way, because that's the learning curve, and that's an important learning curve.
And that leads us to the next slide, where we talk about decision-making options. Lots of parents think it's an either or thing of guardianship or not guardianship. And so we found that including lots of decision-making options in Section 5, including supported decision-making, money management options, power of attorney, along with trusts, representative payee, healthcare surrogate, mental health advance directive, guardian advocacy, and limited guardianship. Talking about those were really, really important. And we also offer some checklists that we have collected from different places that parents, family members, and students can complete and help them decide. It's not an either or kind of situation. There are lots of different levels, lots of different layers. And rather than referring to all of this as guardianship, we like to refer to it as decision-making options. So that's what we've done with this. And lastly, we'd like to thank you for attending our presentation today. We've included our contact information there. And on the site for the Institute, you will find some questions that we've also included a lot to kind of go parallel with our presentation. This slide gives all of the social media contact and contact information for the center on the University of Central Florida campus. But we'd like to thank you so much for attending, and know that we are available to talk with you, communicate with you, and we're anxious to hear how you feel about the toolkit. Thank you so much.